April 17, 1969, the jungle east of Nui Dat falls silent. No birds, no insects, just the weight of green darkness pressing down on 5 men who have not spoken in 4 days. They are Australian SAS. They move like smoke through vegetation so thick it swallows sound. Somewhere ahead beneath their boots lies a secret that will break an enemy battalion. Before we dive deep into this incredible story of stealth, intelligence, and warfare, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications for Vietnam War records. We bring you the untold stories, the declassified operations, the real history that changed the course of the Vietnam War. Don't miss a single episode. Subscribe now. This is not a story about firepower. This is not about American airstrikes or artillery barrages that shake the earth. This is about patience, about silence, about 5 men who understood that the most dangerous weapon in war is not the rifle you carry, but the intelligence you capture. The Australians did not fight the Vietnam War the way the Americans did. They fought it the way the jungle demanded. Slowly, carefully, with an understanding that every footprint tells a story, every broken twig reveals a path, and every document left behind by a careless enemy can destroy an entire battalion. Viet Cong Province, 1966. When the Australians arrived, this place was a Viet Cong stronghold. The enemy owned the nights. They owned the villages. They owned the jungle trails that snaked through hills and rubber plantations. D445 Battalion controlled this territory with an iron grip. 500 to 700 fighters, battle-hardened, experienced, absolutely lethal. They were not local guerrillas hiding in family tunnels. They were main force Viet Cong, capable of sustained combat operations, coordinated attacks, sophisticated ambushes. They had fought the French. They had fought the South Vietnamese. Now they would fight the Australians. And they expected to win. D445 was not just another enemy unit. They were the spine of Viet Cong operations in Viet Cong Province. They provided security for local guerrilla units. They conducted attacks on Australian bases. They laid mines on roads. They ambushed patrols. They controlled the long high hills, a fortress of caves and tunnels where they trained, rested, and planned operations. They controlled the Hat Dike Secret Zone, a massive base area deep in the jungle where battalions could disappear for weeks. The Americans had tried to break them. Large-scale search and destroy operation, helicopter assaults, artillery bombardments that turned entire grid squares into moonscapes. And yet, D445 survived. They melted into They returned after the Americans left. The body count went up, but the enemy remained. Then the Australians arrived with a different philosophy. The 1st Australian Task Force established their base at Nui Dat in 1966. They brought infantry battalions, artillery, engineers, and a small unit that would change everything. The Australian Special Air Service Regiment, the SAS. These were not typical soldiers. They were selected from the best men in the Australian Army, then trained beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, beyond the point where most men quit. They learned to move through jungle without sound. They learned to track like Aboriginal hunters, reading the forest floor like a book written in crushed leaves and disturbed soil. They learned to live on handfuls of rice and creek water. They learned to observe without being observed, to kill without being heard, to disappear into terrain that offered no cover. Most importantly, they learned patience. American patrols moved fast, covering 5 to 10 kilometers a day, searching for the enemy with firepower and aggression. SAS patrols moved 1 to 2 kilometers a day, sometimes less. They would spend an entire day watching a single trail junction, counting footprints, noting the direction of travel, the depth of impression, the age of the track. They would sit motionless in the rain for hours, watching smoke rise from a distant cooking fire, calculating distance and direction. They operated in 4 or 5-man teams, deep in enemy territory, for 7 to 14 days at a time. No resupply, no reinforcement. If they made contact with a superior force, they had 2 options: call for extraction or die. Silence was survival. A cough could kill you. A metallic click could kill your entire patrol. Cigarette smoke could kill you 3 days later when the enemy tracked your smell back to your hide position. The Americans measured success in body count. How many enemy killed? How many weapons captured? The scoreboard of attrition. The Australians measured success differently. How much intelligence did you gather? What did you learn about enemy movements, base areas, supply routes, command structure? Did you capture documents? Did you identify leaders? Did you map the invisible infrastructure that allowed the enemy to keep fighting? This fundamental difference in approach is why the Australians succeeded in Phuoc Tu province where larger American forces struggled elsewhere. They understood that guerrilla warfare is not about killing every enemy soldier. It is about dismantling the system that allows those soldiers to operate. And the key to dismantling that system is intelligence. The Viet Cong were meticulous record keepers. They had to be. Communist military doctrine demanded detailed reporting, personnel rosters, supply requisitions, after-action reports. Every unit maintained files on their soldiers, their missions, their supply needs. Commanders wrote reports to higher headquarters. Political officers maintained morale documents, propaganda materials, self-criticism sessions. Soldiers wrote letters home. The documents were hidden in tunnel caches, buried in waterproof containers, concealed in false walls of village huts. As long as those documents remained hidden, they were harmless. But once captured, they became weapons of devastating power. Operation January 1966. Joint American and Australian forces discovered a massive tunnel complex near Cu Chi, northwest of Saigon. American tunnel rats descended into the darkness with pistols and flashlights, clearing chambers one by one. Australians took a different approach. They sent engineers down with explosives, yes, but first they sent intelligence officers. What they found changed the war in that sector. Hundreds of documents, personnel rosters, attack plans, supply manifests, maps showing tunnel networks extending for kilometers underground. The intelligence revealed that the tunnels were not just hiding places. They were a complete underground city with hospitals, kitchens, sleeping quarters, weapons factories, and command centers. More importantly, the documents revealed names. Commander names, political officer names, unit designations, operational plans. Within weeks, targeted operations based on that intelligence crippled Viet Cong operations in the Cu Chi area. Commanders were killed or captured. Supply lines were cut. Base areas were bombed. All because soldiers took the time to capture documents instead of just blowing up tunnels and moving on. The Australians learned this lesson well. They applied it systematically in Phuoc Tu province. 1967. Operations Ingham and Paddington. Australian infantry battalions swept through the long high hills, D445 Battalion's fortress. The fighting was brutal. Caves and bunkers had to be cleared one by one. Australians lost men to booby traps, ambushes, sniper fire. But they persisted. And when they finally pushed D445 out of the hills, they found the documents. Personnel files identifying officers and enlisted men by name, rank, and unit assignment. Training manuals showing Viet Cong tactics and doctrine. Supply records revealing where food, ammunition, and medical supplies came from. Letters from soldiers to their families, filled with complaints about shortages, exhaustion, casualties. Each captured letter was a small intelligence victory. Together, they painted a comprehensive picture of D445 Battalion's structure, its strengths, its weaknesses, and most critically, its leadership. Intelligence officers at Task Force headquarters in Nui Dat began building target folders, photographs when available, known associates, movement patterns, habits. One captured document mentioned that a particular D445 company commander always met with his political officer near a specific stream junction on the 5th day of each month. 2 months later, an SAS patrol was waiting at that stream junction. The meeting never happened. Artillery fire requested by the patrol turned the location into a crater. Did they kill the commander? Unknown. But D445 stopped using that location. The intelligence changed enemy behavior. That is the ultimate measure of its value. The SAS took document exploitation to another level. Their long-range patrols went places conventional infantry could not reach. Deep into Hat Dike, the secret zone where D445 disappeared between operations. Deep into the Maytao Mountains, where supply trails crossed from Cambodia. They moved through these areas like ghosts, observing, recording, occasionally capturing small caches, a tunnel entrance hidden beneath roots, a waterproof bag buried, a hollow log stuffed with papers. Each small find added pieces to the intelligence puzzle. April 1969, an SAS patrol operating east of Nui Dat picked up a trail, not fresh, maybe 2 days old. 4 or 5 individuals, moving carefully, probably armed, not rushing, not closing the distance, just staying with the trail, reading the story written in disturbed leaves and scuffed soil. The trail led to a small clearing. Signs of recent occupation, cooking fire, cold, trash pit, half filled, and a tunnel entrance partially concealed beneath a fallen log. SAS protocol was clear. Do not enter tunnels alone. Call for engineers or infantry support to clear them properly. But the patrol commander, a sergeant with 3 tours in Vietnam, noted the tunnel entrance was fresh, recently dug or recently reopened, and nearby disturbed earth suggested something had been buried, then removed. Someone had been here very recently, possibly within the last few hours, and they had taken something from this location, which meant they might return. The patrol withdrew 50 meters and established an observation position. They waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, motionless in the oppressive heat, surrounded by insects, controlling their breathing, ignoring discomfort. This is what separated SAS from ordinary soldiers: the ability to endure discomfort without reaction, to wait without impatience, to maintain focus when every instinct screams to move, to shift position, to scratch the insect bite that burns like fire on your neck. Just before dusk, movement. 3 Viet Cong, moving cautiously into the clearing. They approached the tunnel entrance, looked around, then one disappeared underground, while the others stood guard. Minutes passed. The VC emerged carrying a bundle wrapped in plastic. Documents. The SAS faced a decision: ambush the VC now, capture or kill them, seize the documents, or follow them. See where they go, potentially discover a larger base or meeting site. The patrol commander chose patience. They let the VC leave. Then they followed, through fading light, through darkness, navigating by sound and instinct. The VC moved confidently, not expecting pursuit. They walked for 2 hours, finally arriving at another small clearing. More VC waited there, 6 or 7 men. A meeting. The documents were spread out, even from a distance. The SAS could see maps, papers covered in Vietnamese text. This was a command meeting. Junior officers or senior NCOs reviewing operations, discussing plans. The SAS watched until the meeting ended, then tracked the participants back to their separate locations. Over the next 3 days, they mapped enemy movement patterns in that sector, identifying multiple tunnel entrances, cache sites, and trails. Then they returned to the original tunnel, the one where the documents. They carefully excavated the entrance, widening it just enough for a small man to descend. One trooper went down, headlamp off, working by feel. The tunnel was short, only 3 meters deep, ending at a small chamber carved from clay. Inside, more bundles. The trooper carefully brought them up, waterproof wrapping. Inside, documents. Lots of documents, personnel rosters, training schedules, supply requisitions, and critically, a list of names with ranks and unit assignments. D445 Battalion leadership, company commanders, platoon leaders, political officers, staff positions. Besides some names, notes in Vietnamese describing their roles, their experience, their effectiveness. This was a command roster, a complete organizational chart of D445 Battalion's leadership structure. The patrol carefully repacked everything, then collapsed the tunnel entrance to hide their presence. They moved to an extraction point and radioed for helicopter pickup. The documents went straight to Task Force Intelligence. The enemy's interpreters worked through the night, translating, cross-referencing with existing files, building a comprehensive picture. What they found was extraordinary. Not only did they have names and positions, but the documents also revealed recent changes in command structure. 2 company commanders had been replaced. A new battalion executive officer had been appointed. Political officer. This indicated D445 was reorganizing, possibly due to casualties, possibly due to leadership failures. The documents also revealed something more subtle, but equally important: morale problems. Tucked among the official rosters were personal letters, confiscated by political officers during self-criticism sessions. Soldiers complaining about food shortages, complaints about inadequate weapons, complaints about Australian artillery that struck without warning, Australian patrols that appeared like phantoms, Australian intelligence that seemed to anticipate every move. One letter, written by a D445 platoon leader to his superior, described an incident where his unit was moving at night and stumbled into an ambush. No shots fired. Just silence, then sudden, overwhelming fire from concealed. Half his platoon killed or wounded in 30 seconds. The survivors fled. The next day, they found the ambush site. No bodies, no equipment, no sign the Australians had ever been there except the empty cartridge casings and the blood of his men soaking into the earth. The letter concluded with a question that revealed everything about the psychological impact of Australian operations. How did they know we would be there? This was the central mystery that haunted D445 Battalion. How did the Australians know where to ambush, when to call artillery, which trails were being used, which base areas were occupied? The answer, of course, was intelligence. Methodical, patient, comprehensive intelligence gathering. Every captured document, every tracked patrol, every observation by SAS teams deep in, all of it fed into a system that turned information into actionable targeting. And now, with the captured command roster, Australian intelligence had something more. They had names, they had faces, in some cases from previous captures. They had movement patterns, habits, associations. They could build a targeting matrix. Over the following months, Australian operations changed. Instead of large sweeps searching for the enemy, they conducted small, precise operations based on intelligence. An SAS patrol set up on a trail known to be used by a specific D445 company commander. Artillery fire missions targeted map coordinates where documents indicated supply caches. Psychological operations leaflets dropped over known D445 areas, naming specific officers, offering rewards for their capture, creating paranoia within the enemy command structure. Did the Australians kill or capture every officer on that list? No. Some survived the war, some were transferred, some were lucky. But the impact was not about eliminating individuals. It was about disrupting command and control. D445 Battalion leadership spent the rest of 1969 and into 1970 constantly moving, unable to establish secure command posts, unable to coordinate operations effectively, always looking over their shoulders. Their soldiers knew the Australians had their names. They knew their leaders were being hunted. And that knowledge eroded confidence, created hesitation, bred suspicion. Were their informers passing information to the Australians? Were the tunnels could they trust anyone? This is the power of intelligence exploitation. It does not just provide targets, it creates psychological pressure that degrades enemy effectiveness from within. The contrast between Australian and American approaches became even clearer when examining operational results. American forces in other provinces conducted massive operations, deploying battalions and brigades, supported by overwhelming firepower. They killed thousands of enemy soldiers. They destroyed countless tons of supply. But the enemy kept coming. New recruits replaced casualties. New supplies flowed down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The infrastructure remained intact. In Phuoc Thu province, the Australians deployed a single task force, approximately 5,000 men at peak strength, supported by far less artillery and air power than American units. Yet by 1970, Phuoc Thu was the safest province in 3rd Corps. D445 Battalion, once the terror of the province, was reduced to company strength effectiveness, avoiding contact, unable to mount significant operations. Local Viet Cong infrastructure collapsed without main force protection. Villages that had been enemy strongholds became secure enough for Australian civic action programs. What made the difference? Tactics. The Australians did not try to kill every enemy soldier. They dismantled the system, and intelligence, particularly captured documents, gave them the roadmap to do it. Consider the mechanics of how this worked. When an SAS patrol captured documents, the process began immediately. The patrol commander conducted preliminary assessment in the field, identifying high-value items. Anything with maps, names, or unit designations received priority. The documents were photographed if possible, then secured in waterproof containers for extraction. Upon return to Nui Dat, intelligence officers took custody. Vietnamese interpreters, usually Kit Carson scouts or former Viet Cong who had defected to the South Vietnamese side, translated the materials. Not just literal translation, but cultural context. What does this phrase mean? What is this person's rank really indicating? What are the implications of this terminology? Each document was cross-referenced against existing intelligence files. A name mentioned in a new document might already appear in 3 other captured documents from different time periods, allowing analysts to track that individual's career progression, unit assignments, associates. Maps were compared with known terrain, trail networks, previous sighting reports. Gradually, a comprehensive picture emerged. Not just what the enemy was doing today, but what they had done last month, what they planned to do next month, and most importantly, the patterns that revealed how they thought, how they made decisions, how they reacted to pressure. This intelligence fed into operational planning at every level. Battalion commanders planning sweeps received briefings on known enemy locations, likely escape routes, probable reactions. Company commanders received target folders on specific objectives. SAS patrol commanders received detailed terrain analysis and intelligence assessments of their patrol areas. And the cycle continued. Operations based on intelligence produced more captured prisoners, captured documents, observed enemy reactions. All of it analyzed, catalogued, fed back into the system. The Viet Cong were fighting an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. Every time D445 changed tactics, the Australians noticed. Every time they moved a base area, SAS patrols tracked them. Every time they tried a new supply route, Australian ambushes waited. It was a war of information, and the Australians were winning. The captured command roster from April 1969 was not a single lucky break. It was the culmination of 3 years of patient intelligence work. Every previous document captured had contributed to understanding D445's structure. Every previous patrol had mapped terrain and trails. Every previous interrogation had revealed pieces of the puzzle. The command roster was simply the piece that connected everything else, that transformed scattered information into a coherent targeting picture. And D445 knew it. Captured documents from late 1969 and early 1970 show a dramatic shift in tone. Earlier documents are confident, aggressive, full of revolutionary rhetoric about inevitable victory. Later documents are defensive, worried, filled with warnings about security. One directive from D445 Battalion headquarters, captured in November 1969, ordered all units to immediately burn non-essential documents, to minimize written communication, to rely on verbal orders whenever possible. Too late, the damage was done. Another directive warned soldiers about Australian patrols. Do not assume the jungle is empty. Do not assume you are safe in rear areas. Australians have been observed deep in territory previously considered secure. Move at night, avoid established trails. Post sentries at all times. Maintain noise discipline. These warnings reveal the psychological impact. D445 was not just losing men and supplies, they were losing confidence. The jungle, their home terrain, their refuge, no longer felt safe. The Australians had taken it from them through sheer persistence and superior fieldcraft. Vietnamese accounts from after the war confirm this. Former Viet Cong soldiers interviewed in the 1980s and 1990s consistently described the Australians with a mixture of respect and lingering fear. One former D445 soldier recalled, "We could hear Americans from a kilometer away, helicopters, radios, vehicles. We always had warning. But Australians, we never heard them. They would be there, watching us, and we did not know until the shooting started. Or worse, they would watch and not shoot. And later our base would be hit by artillery, or our commanders would disappear. We began to feel that they knew everything about us." Another account describes the impact of psychological operations. They dropped papers from planes with our names on them. My commander's name, my name. They offered money for our cap. How did they know our names? Someone must be informing. We began to suspect each other. The fear was not just of Australian soldiers, but of betrayal from within. This is what intelligence operations accomplish. They create doubt, suspicion, paranoia. They make the enemy question their own security. They transform every shadow into a potential threat. By 1970, D445 Battalion was a shadow of its former strength. They avoided major engagements, they operated in small groups, dispersed. Their offensive capability was negligible. They could still lay mines, conduct small ambushes, harass isolated outposts, but they could no longer threaten Nui Dat. They could no longer mass for coordinated attacks. They could no longer control territory. Australian infantry could patrol areas that had been enemy strongholds just 2 years earlier. Engineers could clear roads without constant fear of ambush. Civic action teams could work in villages without being murdered by Viet Cong cadres. Phuoc Tu province was not pacified completely. Guerrilla war continued at low intensity. Mines remained a constant danger. Snipers still took shots at but the main force threat, the organized battalions capable of sustained combat, was broken. And it was broken not primarily through firepower, but through intelligence, through patient work, through captured documents that revealed the invisible architecture of enemy command and control. The lessons here extend far beyond Vietnam. Modern military study the Australian approach as a model for counterinsurgency. Small unit tactics, intelligence-driven operations, patience over aggression. understanding that in guerrilla warfare, the population is the prize, not enemy body count. The Australians understood this intuitively. They had experience from Malaya in the 1950s, where British and Commonwealth forces defeated a communist insurgency through similar methods. They adapted those lessons to Vietnam. They moved slowly. They prioritized intelligence. They built relationships with local populations. They stayed in their areas of operation long enough to understand the terrain, the people, the enemy patterns. American units rotated constantly. 12-month tours. Units arriving and leaving on staggered schedules. No continuity. Australian units stayed longer, maintained institutional knowledge, learned from their mistakes, and critically, they valued the intelligence that captured documents provided. They did not just collect documents and file them away, they exploited them ruthlessly, turning paper into operational advantage. The SAS patrol that captured the D445 command roster in April 1969 probably did not realize the full impact of their find. They knew the documents were valuable. They followed procedure, secured the material, extracted safely. They received commendations. Then they went back into the jungle on another patrol. That is the nature of special operations. You do the work. You complete the mission. You rarely see the full consequences. The intelligence officers who translated those documents understood their significance. The commanders who used that intelligence to plan operations saw the result. And the soldiers of D445 Battalion felt the pressure. Day after day, week after week, as their world contracted, their options narrowed, their leaders fell or fled, their confidence eroded. This is how wars are won, not through single dramatic battles, but through accumulated pressure, applied relentlessly over time. The Australians applied that pressure with a precision that American firepower could not match. There is a broader question here about military culture and effectiveness. Why were the Australians so much better at this kind of warfare? Part of the answer is selection and training. SAS troopers were volunteers, selected from the best soldiers, trained to the highest standards, but American special forces were also elite. The difference was doctrinal. The Australian Army had a culture that valued patience, fieldcraft, and intelligence. American military culture valued aggression, firepower, and speed. Neither approach is inherently wrong. They suit different situations. In conventional warfare against a peer adversary, American methods are devastatingly effective. But in counterinsurgency, against an enemy who refuses decisive battle, who melts away before superior firepower, who fights from the shadows, the Australian approach proved superior. This was not a matter of courage. American soldiers were just as brave as Australians. It was not a matter of equipment. Australians used mostly the same weapons as Americans. It was a matter of how they thought about the war. Americans saw Vietnam as a military problem to be solved through attrition. Kill enough enemy and they will quit. Australians saw it as an intelligence problem. Understand the enemy system and dismantle it piece by piece. The captured documents gave them the blueprint for that dismantling. Without those documents, they would still have been effective. SAS patrols would still have gathered intelligence through observation. Infantry operations would still have pressured the enemy, but the documents accelerated the process. They provided shortcuts, revealed vulnerabilities, identified targets. They turned months of painstaking intelligence work into actionable targeting data overnight. And once the Australians demonstrated they could exploit captured documents effectively, the enemy became more cautious, more paranoid, more focused on security, which meant they spent less time planning operations and more time worrying about information security, which degraded their effectiveness further. It was a self-reinforcing cycle. The more the Australians learned, the more the enemy worried about security. The more the enemy worried about security, the less effective they became. The less effective they became, the more pressure they felt. And under pressure, people make mistakes. They leave documents behind when they flee artillery fire. They forget to burn papers when Australian patrols approach unexpectedly. They get sloppy. And the Australians capitalized on every mistake. This is the craft of intelligence warfare. It is not glamorous. There are no dramatic Hollywood moments where a single captured document reveals the enemy's master plan and wins the war. It is grinding, detailed work, translating thousands of pages of mundane supply requisitions to find the one item that reveals a logistics hub, cross-referencing hundreds of names to identify a pattern that reveals a command relationship, comparing dozens of maps to triangulate a base area, interviewing defectors to confirm or deny information from documents, building a database of knowledge brick by brick, fact by fact, until the picture resolves and you can see the enemy system clearly enough to strike it where it hurts. The Australians were masters of this craft, and the price D445 Battalion paid for leaving their documents in that tunnel in April 1969 was catastrophic. Not immediately, not in a single disastrous battle, but gradually, as the Australians used that information to hunt their leaders, disrupt their operations, dominate their territory. By the time D445 realized the extent of the compromise, it was too late. The Australians knew too much. The system was broken. There is something profound about this story. It speaks to the nature of modern technology matters. Firepower matters. But information matters more. The side that understands the battlefield better, that knows the enemy more deeply, that can turn knowledge into action faster, that side wins. Not always, not in every battle, but over time, across a campaign, superior intelligence defeats superior firepower. The Americans had B-52 bombers, helicopter gunships, artillery that could flatten square kilometers. D445 feared none of that as much as they feared Australian patrols moving silently through the jungle, Australian intelligence officers reading their captured documents, Australian commanders who seemed to know their plans before they executed them. Fear of the invisible is worse than fear of the visible. You can hide from bombers, you can evade artillery, but you cannot hide from an enemy who knows your name, knows your position, knows your habits. That kind of fear is paralyzing. And D445 was paralyzed. The Australian withdrawal from Vietnam began in 1971. The task force at Nui Dat was gradually reduced, then finally closed. The Australians went home. D445 Battalion survived. They continued fighting until the fall of Saigon in 1975. They were there when North Vietnamese tanks rolled into the city. And in the largest sense, they were right. The Communists won the war. But in Phuoc Tue province, from 1966 to 1971, they lost. They lost to a smaller force that understood intelligence warfare better than anyone else in that war. The documents captured in April 1969 were just one piece of that story, but they symbolize the entire Australian approach: patience, precision, professionalism, the willingness to do the hard work of intelligence gathering and exploitation, the understanding that in counterinsurgency, information is the ultimate weapon. For the SAS troopers who captured those documents, it was just another patrol, another week in the jungle, another bundle of enemy papers added to the pile at headquarters. They did not know they had delivered a decisive blow to D445 Battalion's command structure. They did not see the operations that followed, the pressure that mounted, the enemy's gradual disintegration. They just did their job, moved silently, observed carefully, captured the intelligence, extracted safely, and then went back into the jungle to do it again. That is the nature of special operations. The work is invisible. The impact is undeniable. Decades later, military historians study what the Australians did in Phuoc Tue province. They analyze the tactics, the doctrine, the results. They ask why such a small force was so effective. The answer is always the same: intelligence. The Australians fought a thinking person's war. They outfought the enemy. And when you outthink your enemy, you do not need to outfight them. You just need to be patient enough to let your superior understanding translate into operational advantage. The documents captured in April 1969 gave them that understanding, and D445 Battalion never recovered. The jungle east of Nui Dat is quiet now. The tunnels have collapsed. The trails are overgrown. The documents are archived in Australia, yellowing paper covered in Vietnamese script, translated decades ago, their secrets long since exploited. But the lessons remain. In an age of satellites and drones and signals intelligence, it is easy to forget the power of simple paper documents. A personnel roster, a supply manifest, a letter from a homesick soldier. These things seem trivial compared to, but they are not, because they reveal the human dimension of warfare. The names, the fears, the weaknesses, the patterns of behavior that no technology can fully capture. The Australians understood this. They valued the documents because they valued understanding their enemy as human beings with predictable needs, habits, and vulnerabilities. And they used that understanding to dismantle D445 Battalion piece by piece, leader by leader, operation by operation, until nothing remained but a broken unit hiding in the jungle, afraid of shadows, wondering how the Australians always knew. This is the story that needed to be told. Not a story of dramatic battles and heroic charges, a story of patience, intelligence, and the quiet professionalism that wins wars. The SAS patrol that captured those documents in April 1967-9 did not fire a shot that day. They did not call for airstrikes. They did not engage the enemy. They just observed, waited, and took the intelligence when the opportunity presented itself, and that single act of patient professionalism contributed more to defeating D445 Battalion than 100 airstrikes or artillery barrages. Because they understood what the enemy feared most was not firepower, but knowledge. The knowledge that the Australians were always watching, always learning, always closing in. That psychological pressure, applied relentlessly over months and years, is what broke D445. And it all started with captured documents and the intelligence exploitation that turned paper into power. The Australians proved that in counterinsurgency warfare, the pen truly is mightier than the sword. As long as you are willing to do the hard work of reading what the enemy writes, understanding what it means, and acting on that knowledge with precision and patience. D445 Battalion learned this lesson too late. The Australians had already won the intelligence war. Everything else was just the inevitable consequence of that victory. If you found this story as powerful as I did, then you need to stay connected with Vietnam War records. We uncover the operations that changed history, the tactics that won battles, the intelligence that defeated entire enemy units. This channel is dedicated to bringing you the real stories, the documented history, the declassified truth about the Vietnam War. Click subscribe right now, hit that notification bell. Share this video with anyone who loves military history, special operations, or the untold stories of courage and intelligence that define modern warfare. The Australian SAS wrote the Handbook on Jungle Warfare and Intelligence Operations. Their legacy lives on in special forces units around the world, and their story deserves to be remembered, studied, and honored. Thank you for watching Vietnam War Records. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never forget the lessons that history teaches us. Subscribe now.